Do you need a dynamic or a condenser microphone? In this video, I'll teach you the most important differences so that you can decide for yourself. You can find links to all of these microphones in the description below. Let's take a quick look at how dynamic and condenser microphones work. A dynamic microphone, or more specifically a moving coil microphone, consists of a diaphragm, a coil, and a magnet. The diaphragm and the coil are attached to one another, and the coil is wrapped around the magnet. When sound waves interact with the diaphragm, it causes the coil to move within the magnetic field of the magnet, resulting in an electrical current on the coil of wire. A condenser microphone, sometimes called a capacitor microphone, consists of a diaphragm, a backplate, and an amplifier. The diaphragm and backplate are in close proximity to one another with a bit of space between them. When sound waves interact with the diaphragm, the space between the diaphragm and the backplate changes, which varies the capacitance and results in an electrical current. The circuitry within a condenser microphone requires phantom power, which is usually supplied by the microphone preamp. Thanks to the generally more rugged design of moving coil microphones, they're more durable against all sorts of wear and tear. For example, the Shure SM58 is known to be virtually indestructible. This mic has been dropped many times, and though it has a dented windscreen and some scratches to show for it, it still sounds more or less the same as it did when I bought it. Some condenser microphones, such as the Shure SM81, are more rugged, but honestly, most condenser mics should be handled with more care, because dropping them could change their sound. I think you'll just need to take my word on this one. Generally speaking, the greater mass of a dynamic microphone gives it the ability to handle greater input levels. On the flip side, condenser microphones are generally more sensitive than dynamic mics, which gives condenser mics an advantage when capturing relatively quiet sources. The sensitivity of a microphone describes the electrical output that can be expected at a given sound pressure level. The active circuitry within condenser microphones will have some level of self-noise, while dynamic microphones are passive. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that the condenser microphone will have greater noise overall. As Julian Krause pointed out in a video, when you take into consideration the lower sensitivity of dynamic microphones, you may find that you'll get a lower noise floor from a condenser microphone because less preamp gain is required. I'd recommend checking out Julian's video to learn more, but in any case, the stronger the signal level going into the microphone, the less the self-noise matters. Here's an example of a dynamic microphone, the Shure SM7B, and a condenser microphone, the Rode NT1A. The Shure SM7B is known for needing a lot of preamp gain to make up for its very low sensitivity, whereas the Rode NT1 has a higher sensitivity and requires less gain for someone who speaks quietly, like I'm speaking right now. The polar pattern of a microphone describes how it reacts to sounds coming from different angles. While an omnidirectional polar pattern picks up sound evenly in all directions, a cardioid pattern will pick up sound best from the front and reject sound from the rear. The polar pattern of a microphone can be used to optimize the rejection of room noise, and it can also be used to increase the max gain before feedback. You just need to point the rejection point of the polar pattern toward the source of the noise that you're trying to reject. A tighter polar pattern also helps with reducing the impacts of an echoey room. Both dynamic and condenser microphones come in a variety of polar patterns, but some condenser microphones even have multiple polar patterns that can be selected to suit each situation. For example, this Austrian Audio OC818 and this LEWITT LCT640TS can be switched between cardioid, omni, and figure 8. A condenser microphone will often have a more linear frequency response compared to a dynamic microphone. Don't get me wrong here, these are just generalizations. Plenty of detailed and bright dynamic mics exist, including this Telefunken M80. It's best to look at the frequency response of a microphone on a case-by-case basis. If you plan to record various instruments for various types of music, you'll probably want a variety of dynamic and condenser microphones with a variety of voicings. Another sonic characteristic of condenser microphones is an improved transient response, meaning the microphone reacts more quickly to sudden changes in sound pressure level. You can even find differences in the transient response between small diaphragm condenser mics like the Shure KSM141 and large diaphragm condenser microphones like the Rode NT1A. In general, the lower the mass of the diaphragm, the quicker it can respond to transients. Again, this doesn't mean that condenser microphones are necessarily better than dynamic microphones. They're just different. Choose a microphone that's going to give you the sound you want, whether that means precisely capturing every minute change in SPL, or whether it means dampening some of those details for a warmer recording. Over here, I've got the Telefunken M81, a relatively dark-sounding dynamic mic. Next, I've got the Telefunken M80, a relatively bright-sounding dynamic mic. I've got the Rode NT1A, a large diaphragm condenser microphone. And finally, the Shure KSM141, a small diaphragm condenser microphone. These are just 4 microphones of the hundreds or thousands that are available, and each one has its own distinct tone. So again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not about which is better or worse. It's about which flavor you need for the situation at hand. Dynamic mics are generally less expensive to produce than condenser mics. If you're on a very strict budget, you'll likely get a lot more for your money when you go with a dynamic microphone than going for a condenser microphone at the same price. For example, this Shure SM58 and this Audio-Technica AT2020 both cost about $100. It's difficult to directly compare these microphones because they each have their strengths, but I believe I got a lot more out of the $100 I spent on this dynamic microphone than the $100 I spent on this condenser mic. Even though I now have several more expensive microphones, I continue to use this Shure SM58 and will for years to come, as it's extremely versatile and extremely durable. However, I rarely find myself reaching for the AT2020 because there aren't many situations where it's still the best option now that I have some other mics to choose from. I've left links to all of these mics in the description below this video. Remember, when you buy something after clicking one of those links, you support Audio University at no extra cost to you, which helps me create more content like this. Thank you for watching.